All right, we are back and it's good vibes time. And I am with the vivacious Debbie Cox DeNova, transformation coach. Good to see you, Debbie.
It's good to see you as well.
Well, I love this topic today. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm very ready. This is going to be a good one. A lot of people out there, we're going to tune you into arguing well in relationships. Mm-hmm. That's a good one.
Yes. Yes.
Everybody's listening now.
Everybody should be listening because arguments are a part of relationships. You know, some people believe that you shouldn't argue in relationships. That is impossible. Or actually, it's not impossible. But when you don't, when you're avoiding conflict in your relationships, what often happens is that there's a separation of intimacy. There's a cost to it, right? So what we're talking about today, and we've talked about this before, is that the quality of your conflicts, the quality of your arguments actually determines whether you have a strong relationship or a corroded relationship. So we want to look at relationships in terms of the quality, right? That, you know, we all know people who have stayed together for, you know, decades, and you can call that a successful marriage. But then when you look with a microscope at the quality of the relationship, their self-esteem is corroded, their relationship is corroded. They've stayed together maybe because of the kids or because of finances or religion or whatever it is, but the relationship is actually not very successful when you look at it. So what we want to talk about is how to set up for conflict. And I want to start with a quote from John Gray. He says, "And more often than not, and check yourself at home to see if this actually applies to you, a woman shares her upset feelings, and as a result, a man feels unloved. To him, her negative feelings sound like criticism, blame, or resentment. And when he becomes defensive or attacks her or dismisses her feelings, she feels unloved." The success of a relationship is solely dependent on two factors: a man's ability to listen lovingly and respectfully to a woman's feelings, and a woman's ability to share her feelings in a loving and respectful way. Mm-hmm. A relationship requires that partners communicate their changing feelings and needs. Now, the problem, of course, is that when someone feels like they've been slighted in relationship, there's a contraction that happens. Mm-hmm. And so with that contraction comes a rigidness. And our first initial response to that is not to share from the vulnerable place, not to share from the fear or the pain, but actually to use that secondary emotion of anger to basically punish the person who's harmed you, right? Mm-hmm. And so what you get instead of, wow, that was really painful, right? Mm-hmm. And actually sharing from vulnerability is slammed doors and not speaking to them for days, or screaming or pointing and accusing mm-hmm. and criticizing and blaming and all of those things, right? Mm-hmm. And so, of course, what happens there is that in those arguments, your prefrontal cortex goes offline and you're basically going into this Neanderthal mode where you're actually showing up with the person that you love the most in a way that is really unloving. So you choose
tit for tat.
That's correct. You choose being mean over being sad, actually sitting with the vulnerability of the sadness that was created in the context of it.
That's a good point. So you're mean instead of sad. Yeah. So you jump over the sad to mean.
Correct. And then, of course, that just sets off a sort of back and forth of defensiveness mm-hmm. and counter-accusing, and it becomes a brawl of sorts, right? And mm-hmm. over time, you can pattern yourself to this in relationships. So it's really important, and this information, by the way, comes from Esther Perel and Jimmy Knowles, some from the Gottman Institute, and, of course, John Gray. And what Jimmy Knowles says is that you really want to, before you get to a crisis, mm-hmm. decide right now to reset the way that you argue, especially at home, if you know that the way that you're arguing with your partner is ineffective. It's actually causing a corrosion in the relationship.
You know, I always tell people, if you hear the word, guys, listen carefully. If you hear the word whatever, you hear that from your woman, you've answered one thing too many.
Mm-hmm. And it's a dismissal. And here's the thing mm-hmm. to know about whatever. If you're the woman or the man who is saying whatever, you really need to check yourself, because this is an ineffective way to show up in arguments. So coming to the table and actually being able to hit the reset button and say, listen, I want to talk about the way that we handle conflict before you're in a conflict, okay? Mm-hmm. Don't wait until you're in the midst of a conflict. Right. It'll just create more conflict.
Whatever.
Right, exactly. But you're having a discussion about the way that you fight, the things that are effective, the things that are ineffective. What are the boundaries? In other words, yelling, cursing, accusing, dismissing, are those things that are going to end the conversation? Mm-hmm. What can we do? How do you even introduce? How do you ask your partner to talk about something that's a conflict? That's a real big deal for a lot of people, because here's what. You need to ask yourself, honestly, at home, does it matter to me when my partner is having an upset? or a desire that's being unmet or some sort of concern. And does it matter enough to me that they are emotionally not doing well? And am I open to helping them to actually feel better? And if the answer is yes, then you need to be prepared, because you're not going to like it when they come to you with it. Like, honestly, that and if you convey to them that you're not open and available, what you're unintentionally communicating is, if you have something that upsets you, you can't count on me and you can't trust me to be a safe place to help you feel better. Don't come to me, because I'm actually going to make you feel worse. And so over time, that can cause a lot of trouble in the relationship. And,
And isn't that when couples or one of them starts going out the nest?
Sometimes.
They find somebody who will listen, who will bring them in.
So,
and the other person out the nest may be opportunistic.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is make sure that you have this conversation, especially before you've had a crisis. Not that to say that if you've had a crisis, if you've had infidelity, if you've had, a breakdown or even a breakup, that you can't come back from that. But it's just easier to hit the reset button and come to the table and say, in the future, if I have a conflict, how would you like me to bring it up? And what are the boundaries in our communications? Once you've set a new agreement, now you have new parameters around which you can and remember that you're on the same side, of the table with the problem on the other side. And then you can agree to that. It's not going to be easy, but agree to those new terms going forward. And there's so many reasons why it's important.
And if you hear whatever, open the door and run like hell. All right, we're coming back. Part 2. Very important topic. Don't go away. Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. Alford and Associates, for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality. Terrebonne General Health Systems, modern technology and timeless caring. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights. All right, we're back. Great topic today. This is part 2 of arguing well in relationships. So let me turn to this camera now, because I'm going to ask Debbie something. So you walk in the house and you're arguing with your girlfriend, or the girlfriend's arguing with the boyfriend, and you get the silent treatment.
Stonewalling is what we call that.
Is that what that is?
Stonewalling, and it's one of the 4 character behaviors that have been identified. John Gottman actually did a study on thousands of couples, and he was able to predict with 90% accuracy who would get a divorce based on the presence of 4 different behaviors. You ready for them? Okay, so check yourself and be honest at home to see if these are something that are included in your argument style. Defensiveness, criticism, contempt, we've talked about that, and stonewalling. Okay. If you are using these, and look, it's not that all of us have some that kind of pop up, but if you're using them chronically in your arguments, you're tearing down your relationship, and there's a great chance that it won't survive.
Doesn't stonewalling come after the other 3?
Stonewalling is some people's go-to is stonewalling. Some people prefer to go into that behavior like a passive aggressive, I'm not speaking to you kind of thing, right? Because it just feels safer for them. Some people go into criticism right away, right? And so it's important to remember that in defensiveness, for example, you're leaving your partner feeling unheard and alone. In criticism, you're leaving them feeling attacked and bullied. In contempt, you're making them feel inferior and rejected. And with stonewalling, you're basically making them feel abandoned. So none of those things brings you to closeness, right? All of those things are a pointing at. And there's a Esther Perel says there's a little really unique thing that human beings do in relationships is that we have a tendency when we do something wrong to create, it's because it's situational, it's circumstantial. I was late because there was traffic. I was late because, this thing happened that I wasn't expecting. Whereas when our partner does something wrong, we make it more characterological. Well, it's because you're inconsiderate and you're selfish and you're narcissistic. And so we do this thing where we excuse our own behavior as circumstantial and situational, and we make theirs a product of their structure, the internal structure. And so when we catch ourselves doing this, it's really important, she says, to actually apply some humor, to recognize, oh, I'm doing that thing right now, right? And the other thing that we do is we go into, because it's a rigid contraction, it's like, you always, you never, right? We use this language, and what we do is we make these pseudo-factual statements. So the first thing, if I say, you never help me with the kids, right? The first thing that the partner is going to do is scan for all the times that's not true. I helped you with the kids last Sunday, right?
Yeah.
And it's because
Last year.
Right. So it's like it causes a defensiveness. So it's important to use language that has you being responsible for your own feelings, actually taking ownership and saying, I feel, this is how I feel. That's a much different thing than saying you
But isn't
never.
it the way you deliver it too? Because if you come in and go, you never help me with the kids, or you say, I'm sad because you never helped me with the kids.
Yeah.
Delivery is important.
The delivery is so important. And really, that's a very good point, too, because it's about dropping into the vulnerability. That takes a lot of courage, because when you are feeling like you've been harmed, there is a defensive part that comes up in a lot of people where it's like, okay, now I'm harming you, tit for tat, like you said. Whereas if you actually say, wow, when you did that, I actually felt disrespected. When you've been late several times, and so the thought is like, you've been late several times, I've told you it bothers me, you're still late, therefore you must not respect me. Okay, that's kind of like we do this confirmation bias. They don't respect me. And then over and over again, we find these signs, right? And so it's important to be able to say, this is how I feel. And then rather than trying to convince the other person that they shouldn't feel that way when they already do, you actually don't abandon them in their experience. You don't have to agree with them in order to assign value or validate what they're feeling, right? I can understand how you might feel that way, since you have said that a number of times that this has bothered you. You don't excuse it. You don't tell give you a reason why this time it's actually, a good thing, or there's a reason that I was like, you say, I understand. If I was in your position, I'd probably feel the same way as you. So remember, people don't like to be abandoned in their experience. You actually get behind their eyes and you actually experience it. And I apologize. How can I actually help you to repair this feeling?
And you can diffuse it. I think I told you before that sometimes men want to jump in and tell you why they did something when the woman's not finished yet. And then the woman will go, I didn't ask for your response. I just want you to hear me.
Absolutely. It's really important that women especially, want to feel validated and heard, right? And so if you remember that the goal is to create an agreement where you approach conflict in a mature, kind, and respectful way, and you actually have a conversation about that, like, how would you like me to do it? And so what that might look like is, hey, do you mind if I talk to you about something? And notice, like, you ask and you actually are willing to have them say, I'm not emotionally ready for that. I don't have the bandwidth for that right now. But then it's upon them, if they care about your feelings, to schedule a better time, right? And then you say, when I know that you've been working a lot lately, and that you're really, really busy. But what's been happening a lot lately has been that I feel neglected. You used to hug me. We spend more time together. And lately I'm feeling abandoned for your work. And then the husband, notice there's no criticism, blame. It's just me owning my feelings, right, in a vulnerable way. And if the husband or the boyfriend is feeling that, as actually says, you know what, I can understand how you would feel that way, and it hasn't been my intention to make you feel that way. How about we go on a date this Saturday night, right? So that's the level of conflict that you can have with your partner, a conflict that actually brings you closer together, so that repair makes you stronger going forward.
As we close the show, that's a great show, by the way. As we close this show, just don't use one word. Whatever. Throw whatever out to sea.
No stonewalling.
Right. Thank you. Great job. Good vibes. We'll see you around the corner. Whatever.